In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the front brake hose on this Ford F-150. This is it right here. Goes from the line to the caliper. Let's get started. To begin, let's take off the wheel. On this model, we have a center cap that covers up the lug nuts. If you don't have one, just directly use your 21mm socket and take off the lug nuts. But for us, we have to pry this off. They make a little notch in the wheel where you can remove the center cap. And this will expose the 6 21mm lug nuts. And just like I mentioned earlier, remove all of them, and then we can take off the wheel. Now with the wheel off, let's crimp off the brake hose. I'm gonna crimp it off right over here. I do not recommend doing this with new brake hoses, but I will do it with this one because obviously we're replacing it. And doing this will limit the brake fluid flow out of this hose as we undo everything. I have these plastic clamps specially designed for this. If you don't have it, you could just use some locking pliers, or you could just twist the hose. The downside to not doing this is it's gonna keep leaking. With a 14mm socket and a collection bucket underneath, break free the banjo bolt that holds the line to the caliper. Fluid will start leaking at this point. Keep that in mind. That's why I said you should have a collection bucket to catch said fluid. Take it off all the way. Make sure these copper washers come off of the bolt or the line. I guess they can stay on the line, it doesn't matter. Just make sure they're not on the bolt. That's what matters, so we can use new ones. You don't want to reuse these old ones. Inspect the bolt and make sure the threads are good. Make sure the hole here and here is good. And if the head is completely rotted, well, it's gonna be difficult to tighten properly, so just get a new one in that case. But mine looks good, I'm gonna reuse it. Quite a bit of fluid will come out at this point because the caliper is actually draining, not necessarily what's on the line. Now just grab the line, wiggle it until it pops off. Now make sure the other washer did not stay on the caliper, which it did not. It's actually stuck to the back side of the hose, so we'll just leave it there. And you'll notice no fluid is dripping out of the hose, which is exactly what those pliers are doing. They're restricting the flow. Along the brake hose, there are several things clipped on, including the ABS sensor and this vacuum hose for the vacuum hubs. That is if you have four-wheel drive. If not, then this will not be here. But unclip all of these, leave these large clips onto the brake hose. I don't think you can remove them anyway, but the brake hose should come with new ones. Okay, this is separated now. Follow the brake hose up, it'll lead to this bracket here where we actually have to remove this ABS sensor off of the bracket because the brake hose comes with this bracket. It's built in all together. So we have to transfer this over, get a trim tool or whatever you have that'll get under here and pry this off. These are often very stuck on here, but try not to break it. If you do break it, just wire tie it to the new bracket. There we go. Set that aside. Now the bracket and the brake hose are not secured to anything anymore other than this one bolt holding it to the frame. And now let's break the line free. This is what the back side of this bracket will look like. You have the 10mm bolt here that holds this on. We're not going to touch that yet because we still need this to be somewhat secured to the frame. This line is an 11mm flare nut here, so grab a flare nut wrench, which I highly recommend over a regular wrench. It looks like this, and it basically grabs onto one extra side over a regular open-ended wrench. This way, you're much less likely to strip out this fitting. Now, looking at it, I can already tell the line will most likely not break free from the fitting. When we spin this to break it free, it's gonna spin the whole line with it. Now, it could break free, that would be great, but if it doesn't, I'm gonna show you a trick. Basically, we're just gonna spin the hose off of the line and get it off that way. Try to break this free. Should have mentioned this earlier, but I already sprayed it with a bunch of rust penetrant, hoping that it would help break it free. Okay, what's happening? Yeah, as you can see, the line is spinning, but at least the threads from the fitting broke free. You can work it back and forth at this point if you think it's going to let go and the line will spin, and the fitting will spin freely on the line. Mine, I know, is not going to, so I'm just gonna leave it like this, give it another spray of rust penetrant, and then we'll unbolt the bracket and just spin the hose off of the line. So grab a 10mm socket and let's break this free. A little extension on here, make things easier. Okay, get this bolt out, set it aside. With that off, pull the bracket with the hose off. Try to get all these wires out of here. You can pull the brake line a little bit, not too much, but enough to give you the space you need to turn this, because it will be somewhat stuck in here, but this should basically allow you to get it off of here. Here's what this looks like from the front side. Mine's super stuck here, so I'm holding the fitting. It's spinning somewhat freely, but it's hard to spin, so I'm using pliers here and holding the fitting with my 11mm wrench. I'm just going to keep doing this until it's off. Go. That's at the end of the threads now, finally. As soon as this comes off, yep, fluid's going to want to spray. But there it is. There's the old brake hose. I take my pliers off, throw this away, and let's get the new one on. And at this point, you want to move kind of fast because fluid is actively dripping, and you definitely do not want to drain that master cylinder. Inspect the threads. They look good, so let's get the new hose on. This should go on much smoother, and the other one came off. Okay, it's bottomed out right here, but it's kind of upside down, so I'm going to hold it and snug it, tighten this until it comes back around. The rest of this bend, we can just kind of twist the brake line just a little bit. Get that back in. Just like that. Before I reattach anything else, let's just put it on the caliper. That way it's not leaking anymore. Once again, inspect the caliper, make sure it's good, which this one is. Take your banjo bolt, put one copper washer on, then slide it through the hose. Then put another copper washer on, just like this. Sandwich the hose in between the two. Line it up over here, start it on. Make sure it starts in smoothly. Don't cross thread this. Okay, there we go. I'm going to bottom this out as far as it'll go by hand. Then I'll grab my ratchet or use your wrench, whatever you have, tighten this up. Okay, that's bottomed out. I'm going to go about half a turn. There we go. The goal here is to squeeze these copper washers and allow them to seal up. Since we're in this area, I'm just going to open the bleeder screw now and start the gravity bleeding procedure. 10mm socket, crack this bleeder screw free. What this will do is it's going to allow gravity to pull the fluid down and fill up the caliper, fill up the hose and the new line here, and then we'll perform a full manual brake bleed once this is done. To begin your manual brake bleed, make sure that your brake master cylinder is topped off with clean fluid. Then you're going to want to have a second person in the car pumping up the brake pedal as you open and close the bleeder screw. So after a few pumps, have them hold pressure on the brake pedal and open up the bleeder screw. At this point, air and fluid will come out. Once the pedal has reached the floor, close off the bleeder screw and have them pump up the brakes again. After 2 to 3 pumps, have them hold pressure on the brake pedal once again and open up the bleeder screw. Repeat this procedure until no more air comes out of the caliper and you have only clean fluid. Once you get to that point, close off the bleeder screw and top off the master cylinder with clean fluid to make sure it's full. Now let's reattach everything to the new brake hose, ABS wire, vacuum hose if you have it. Just clip it all in here. This resecured here. There we go. And now let's reinstall this bracket. Put the 10mm bolt in to secure the bracket. Make sure it's snug. And now I'm just going to take my wrench and make sure the line is actually nice and tight. Okay. Now it's important that you clean everything with brake parts cleaner because you don't want to mistake anything for a potential leak. So clean the back side too, right where the line connects. We have a nice steady trickle of fluid, so I'm going to close this up and we can do the manual brake bleed just like I said. Clean everything off here as well, that way you don't mistake residue for a potential leak. Now let's get the wheels back on, put back all 6 of your lug nuts, and torque them all down in a cross pattern to 150 foot-pounds. Double check them. And if you have one of these lug nut covers, go ahead and put it back on.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.